Today, we're exploring the unsettling case of an Indian family living in the suburbs of Texas where everything appeared calm and ordinary until one brief moment on a home security camera changed the course of their lives forever. What began as small shifts in routine soon grew into late-night errands, unexplained absences, and a closeness between a housewife and the family's new driver that no one initially questioned. But when a single piece of footage revealed a moment that couldn't be dismissed, it set off a chain of events so fast and volatile that investigators would later call it one of the most alarming domestic unravelings they had ever encountered. North of Dallas, the Malhotra home blended into a quiet residential street lined with identical lawns, trimmed hedges, and garages that opened at predictable hours. From the outside, nothing suggested tension or unusual movement. Inside, however, daily life was dictated almost entirely by the work schedule of the homeowner, 40-year-old businessman Devansh Malhotra. For more than a decade, he had built a service installation company that depended on his presence. He spent long stretches driving between client properties, troubleshooting equipment issues, supervising technicians, and handling negotiations personally because he never fully trusted others to secure major contracts. The workload shaped him into someone who left the house before sunrise and often returned after dark, sometimes too exhausted to eat at the table. His wife, Malhotra, managed everything outside his professional world. Most of her routines were predictable: morning chores, grocery shopping at a nearby market, and short afternoon visits with two Indian neighbors who lived within walking distance. Her days rarely changed, and she rarely asked her husband to adjust his schedule for her. The marriage functioned through a division of roles. He brought in the income, she ensured the house operated smoothly. For years, this structure kept the household running without major conflict. As the business grew, Devansh began hiring additional support staff. One of those hires was a full-time driver named Ravi, a young immigrant from Ahmedabad who arrived in Texas only months earlier. His job was simple at first: drive company vehicles when needed and pick up materials from suppliers. But the role expanded once he demonstrated reliability. Soon he was responsible for driving Malhotra during her errands, carrying heavy items during her shopping trips, and taking care of basic household tasks when contractors were unavailable or slow. From Devansh's perspective, hiring Ravi reduced stress and freed his schedule. From Malhotra's perspective, it provided consistency and help she had not previously enjoyed. Security cameras were already installed throughout the property long before Ravi appeared. These cameras were part of Devansh's business habits. He used similar systems at job sites to monitor deliveries, verify equipment returns, and document vandalism or theft. The home system mirrored that approach: a camera above the garage door, one near the side path, another over the driveway, and several inside to verify movement when the house was empty. For years, the footage offered nothing more than routine documentation: packages dropped off, neighbors passing by, and Malhotra entering and exiting the house at predictable hours. Devansh rarely reviewed the indoor footage because he assumed it held no value. His interest in the cameras was practical, not obsessive. Most days he glanced only at exterior views to confirm that vehicles, equipment, and deliveries were where they needed to be. When traveling, he checked the front door camera to ensure no suspicious activity occurred around the property. Inside the home, he trusted that life followed the familiar pattern maintained by his wife. But in the weeks before the events that would later draw the attention of investigators, subtle changes appeared, small enough to overlook but persistent enough to unsettle him. Conversations with Malhotra became shorter. Her tone shifted slightly, sounding distracted or hurried. These changes were minor, yet noticeable to a man who had grown used to her steady routine. At first he dismissed them as stress or fatigue, unaware that these small signals marked the earliest point where the rhythm of the household began to shift. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The shift inside the Malhotra household did not happen suddenly. It started with small timing differences that were easy to overlook. Malhotra, who normally returned from errands at predictable hours, began arriving later. When asked, she gave brief explanations about long checkout lines, crowded parking lots, or stores rearranging their shelves. None of it sounded unusual on its own, but the pattern stood out because her routine had been so consistent for years. Ravi's schedule changed as well. Originally hired only to drive, he began staying around the property long after the vehicle was parked. Neighbors later reported seeing him carrying more than just groceries. He brought in boxes, bags, and sometimes tools. Inside the house, he occasionally appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding items that didn't match any active task. To an outside observer, it might have looked like extra help, but to someone paying closer attention, it was a sign that boundaries around his role were shifting. The moment that truly caught Devonsh's attention came on a Tuesday afternoon while he was working through invoices at his office. As part of his routine, he opened the garage camera feed to confirm whether a courier had delivered equipment. Instead, the screen captured a short, unexpected interaction. Ravi was lowering a box onto the floor while Malhotra stood close beside him. As he adjusted his grip, she lightly touched his shoulder, leaning in to say something inaudible. The contact was brief, but it was more familiar than anything he expected to see between his wife and an employee. He replayed the clip twice, then a third time, trying to rationalize it. He told himself it could have been a thank you gesture or simply a moment taken out of context. The camera angle was narrow, and no audio was available. Still, the impression lingered. He minimized the window and attempted to continue his work, but the footage remained on his mind the rest of the day. Later that week, he invited Malhotra to join him at a cousin's engagement party. She declined immediately, saying she had a headache and several chores to finish. Her refusal was not unusual in itself, yet something about her tone felt rushed. When he returned home that evening, he noticed the faint smell of cooked food, but not the kind she typically prepared. More concerning was a small detail by the back entrance, Ravi's sandals placed neatly against the wall. She claimed he had dropped off a package on his way home, but her voice shook slightly as she explained, and she did not meet his eyes. The next morning, she left the house early, saying she wanted to reach the store before crowds formed. As she backed out of the driveway, he found himself watching more closely than usual. There was nothing outwardly suspicious, just a woman leaving to shop, but the mild anxiety in his chest was new. After she drove off, he sat down with his laptop and opened the camera archive. He scrolled through older clips, looking for confirmation that everything was ordinary. Instead, he noticed gaps he had never paid attention to before, moments when she returned home without groceries, or when Ravi appeared in areas of the property where he had no assigned tasks. By the time he closed the laptop, the unease had settled firmly. What began as small timing shifts had become a pattern he could no longer easily dismiss. The changes that had started gradually now became harder for Devonsh to dismiss. Day by day, the communication inside the house narrowed. When he asked simple questions, Malhotra answered with short phrases or redirected the topic entirely. Her behavior shifted from routine to guarded. The phone that she once left on the counter or sofa now stayed either in her hand or flipped face down, even during meals. Notifications were silenced. She kept the screen angled away, an adjustment small enough to overlook at first but persistent enough to signal something was being concealed. Ravi's presence also increased in ways that no longer matched his job description. He stayed long after driving duties ended, always with an explanation ready. One day it was a loose hinge on the hallway door. Another day he claimed an outdoor light was flickering and needed immediate attention. On a third occasion he said he was helping move storage bins that supposedly blocked attic access. None of these tasks required his involvement, yet he positioned himself as indispensable. According to later police interviews, neighbors saw him at the house at hours not typical for an employee. The key moment that shifted suspicion into something more concrete occurred late one evening when Devonsh, working from home, opened the side yard camera feed. The footage showed two silhouettes walking close together along the driveway. At first, the image looked like standard movement, someone being guided around uneven ground. But as the lighting adjusted, the shapes became clearer. It was unmistakably Ravi and Malhotra. Their spacing was too close to be accidental. Ravi's hand hovered near her waist before settling there to steady her around a sprinkler head. It was a gesture that went beyond professional assistance. What stood out even more was her behavior. She looked over her shoulder quickly, scanning the surroundings with the reflex of someone checking whether they were being observed. The moment struck him sharply. He paused the footage and replayed the sequence, examining frame by frame. It left little room for neutral interpretation. Driven by a growing sense of alarm, he switched to archived indoor footage, particularly from the upstairs hallway camera he rarely reviewed. There, in a partially obstructed angle, he caught a short clip, a figure matching Ravi's build moving quietly toward the master bedroom. Seconds later, the bedroom door closed behind him. The camera position did not capture interior activity, but the action itself raised immediate concern. He watched the clip multiple times, each viewing tightening the pressure in his chest. He tried to rationalize shadows, angles, and timing, convincing himself he could be mistaken. Yet the knot in his stomach grew stronger. He stayed awake most of the night, scrolling through camera logs, jumping between dates and timestamps, looking for additional context. The footage looped in his mind until he felt physically ill. The next day, his anxiety intensified when several of his texts to Malhotra went unanswered. Her responses, when they eventually came, were vague and delayed. He attempted to concentrate on work but found himself distracted, repeatedly glancing at his phone and thinking of the footage. By early evening, he made an unplanned decision to return home ahead of schedule. As he pulled into the driveway, house lights glowed in the windows, giving the appearance of normal activity. But once he stepped inside, he heard muffled, indistinct footsteps on the upper floor, sounds that aligned too closely with the sequence he had watched the night before. When Devansh stepped inside the house, the first thing he noticed was the silence. It was not the usual evening quiet, but a tense stillness in which every small noise seemed amplified. The security system sent a mobile alert from the hallway camera, as it routinely did, but this time he opened it immediately. The live feed displayed a clear image, Malhotra walking up the staircase at a steady pace. A few seconds later, Ravi appeared in the same frame, following her without hesitation. Their movements showed no awareness that anyone else was in the house. Seeing the footage while standing only a few feet from the actual staircase created a sense of disorientation. His pulse quickened, and he found it difficult to breathe normally. As he began climbing the stairs, he heard faint steps on the upper floor, soft, deliberate, and matching the direction shown on the live camera feed. His phone vibrated again with a second-floor alert. He glanced down and saw the blurred shapes of two people crossing the landing toward the bedroom area. A moment later, a door clicked shut. This sound triggered an immediate reaction. Heat built in his chest, overriding any logical thought. The combination of the footage he had seen the previous night, the unanswered questions from that morning, and the current sequence unfolding in real time created a rapid surge of anger and panic. He moved down the hallway with quick, uncalculated steps and pushed the bedroom door open with full force. Inside the room, the reaction was immediate. Both individuals turned sharply, startled by his sudden entry. The scene lacked structure, only movement, confusion, and shock. A sharp cry was heard, followed by the sound of objects shifting as bodies scrambled. In that moment, he acted without clear intention. He lunged forward, driven by instinct and an overwhelming emotional response rather than any planned action. The physical confrontation lasted only seconds. In the chaos, he collided with Ravi, who tried to move out of the way. As Devansh pushed forward, his arm struck Malhotra, who lost her balance. She stepped back instinctively but misjudged the distance. Her head hit the corner of the nightstand with a forceful impact. The sound of the collision was distinct and immediately recognizable as serious. She collapsed straight down, without attempting to break her fall. Ravi reacted instantly. He did not try to help her or explain anything. Instead, he darted toward the sliding patio door, knocking over cushions and a small table as he fled. Within seconds he disappeared into the backyard, leaving the house through the unlatched exit. The room felt unsteady as Devansh dropped to his knees beside his wife. He touched her shoulder and face with shaking hands, calling her name, but she showed no response. Her body was completely still. His breathing became irregular as he tried to process what had happened. The intensity of the moment overwhelmed him, and panic took over. He reached for his phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, he struggled to form coherent sentences. The operator repeatedly asked him to slow down and state the emergency, but his words came out fragmented. All he could express was that something had gone terribly wrong and that medical help was needed immediately. When first responders entered the bedroom, they found Devansh on the floor beside his wife, visibly distressed. His hands were shaking, and he kept repeating that everything had happened too quickly and that he had not meant for any of it to occur. Officers separated him from the body and asked basic questions while paramedics confirmed what was already apparent: there were no signs of life. The initial statements he gave were fragmented, but he repeatedly used the word accident, insisting she had simply fallen. While patrol officers secured the scene, detectives from the local violent crimes unit arrived to conduct a more structured assessment. What captured their attention almost immediately was the presence of multiple cameras throughout the home. They noticed the indoor hallway unit, the exterior driveway camera, and another positioned near the staircase. When asked about the system, Devansh confirmed it had been installed years earlier for business and safety reasons. Detectives requested access to the recorded footage, recognizing that the events leading up to the incident could be documented minute by minute. Technicians extracted data from the home network, and within a few hours, investigators reviewed clips that formed a continuous and troubling timeline. They observed footage from several days earlier showing a brief embrace near the garage door, an interaction that suggested familiarity rather than a professional relationship. Another clip displayed a nighttime walk in the driveway area in which Ravi and Malhotra moved closely together, with body language indicating comfort and secrecy. Investigators also uncovered a sequence from the upstairs hallway recorded on an earlier date, where a figure resembling Ravi entered the master bedroom and remained inside for a period of time. Although the interior of the room was not visible, the entry itself was considered significant. The most critical footage, however, was from the night of the incident. The hallway camera showed both individuals ascending the stairs minutes before the fatal event. The timestamp aligned exactly with the muffled sounds neighbors later reported hearing and with the timeline of Devansh's 911 call. The door closing from inside the room matched the digital log to the second. Simultaneously, forensic teams conducted a detailed examination of the bedroom. They found no indication of a simple accidental fall. The angle of the head injury, the depth of the impact, and the blood pattern on the nightstand edge all pointed toward a sudden, forceful collision rather than a slip or misstep. Investigators concluded that the injury resulted from an uncontrolled shove during a physical confrontation, consistent with the chaotic situation described in earlier footage. The next morning, detectives located Ravi at a relative's home in a nearby neighborhood. During questioning, he admitted to having an intimate relationship with Malhotra but insisted he had never expected any violent outcome. He stated that when the confrontation began, he panicked and ran. His account confirmed the affair but did not change the physical evidence already collected. Investigators also reviewed text messages and call records between Ravi and Malhotra, revealing weeks of hidden communication. Although the messages did not explicitly mention plans, the pattern of secrecy helped detectives establish context for the deteriorating situation inside the home. By the time the timeline was fully reconstructed, law enforcement had a clear sequence of events supported by digital records, physical evidence, and witness statements, leaving prosecutors with a detailed basis for formal charges. The trial gained significant public attention from the beginning, largely because of the unusual amount of surveillance evidence tied directly to events inside a private home. Prosecutors opened their case by presenting the camera footage in chronological order. They walked the jury through each recorded moment: the early signs of inappropriate physical closeness in the garage, the late-night appearances captured on the side yard camera, and the hallway recordings showing both individuals going upstairs just minutes before the fatal confrontation. Every clip was shown with timestamps and location markers to demonstrate consistency between the digital log and the sequence described by investigators. Prosecutors argued that the video record showed a clear emotional escalation inside the household. They highlighted the weeks of secrecy, the repeated instances of the driver entering areas of the home unrelated to his duties, and the final movement captured moments before the struggle. According to them, these recordings reflected a mounting crisis for Devonch that culminated in a violent reaction, not an accident. They described the case as the result of internal pressure building without resolution, pointing to his long nights reviewing archives and his increasingly suspicious behavior noted by colleagues in the days prior. The defense acknowledged the confrontation but argued that it happened in a moment of psychological overload. They claimed he experienced a temporary loss of control triggered by sudden discovery and emotional shock. Their central point was that he had no plan or intention to cause permanent harm. They asked the jury to consider whether any person confronted with betrayal inside their own home might have reacted similarly in an impulsive, uncalculated way. Expert testimony, however, pushed the case in the prosecution's favor. A forensic pathologist explained that the fatal injury to Malhotra's head was not consistent with a simple fall. The impact pattern and depth suggested direct force from a shove or collision during physical struggle. Another expert detailed how the door had been closed from inside the bedroom at a time matching the digital record exactly, reinforcing the timeline already provided by the footage. Family members from both sides also testified. Relatives described the couple's marriage as strained long before the incident but said they never expected the situation to escalate into violence. Friends mentioned the distancing, the secrecy, and the changes in communication that preceded the tragedy. Their statements helped establish the emotional climate leading up to the event. After reviewing all the evidence, the jury deliberated and returned a verdict of guilty for second-degree murder. In the sentencing phase, the judge considered the presence of provocation as well as the severity of the outcome. Ultimately, the court imposed a sentence of 28 years in state prison, stating that the act, though not premeditated, resulted from a reckless and violent response that caused irreversible harm. As deputies escorted him out of the courtroom, the screen displaying paused frames from the surveillance footage remained visible to the audience. For investigators and observers, those recordings had served as impartial witnesses, documenting every step that led to the breakdown of a household that once appeared stable. The footage shaped not only the investigation but also the legal judgment that permanently altered the defendant's life.